We call to order the meeting of the San Ramon Planning Commission for August 15, 2023. Ms. Sekhan, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Ahmed, Commissioner Alpert,
Here.
Commissioner Curtis,
Present.
Vice Chair Kuznick,
Here.
and Chair Wallace.
I'm here. Thank you. Commissioner Curtis, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item number 4 on the agenda is public comment. This portion of public comment is for matters that are not not on the agenda tonight. Members of the public can speak for 3 minutes on any subject other than those on the agenda. If they want to speak on those, they will have their opportunity at that time. Please keep your comments within the 3 minutes, on point to the point you're trying to make, and leave out any attacks on anybody. Just we're talking about policy here. Do we have any written communications on general public comment?
No,
Okay, do we have any hands raised for oral public comment?
no,
Okay, okay, do we have any speaker cards?
no speaker cards for this item.
Really? Okay, going once, going twice. Close public comment on item number 4. Item number 5 is additions and revisions. With the consent of my fellow commissioners, I would like to move item number 10.1 up to and in place of item 9.1. So escapology would go before the general plan discussion. So escapology could escape before the general plan discussion. Okay, on the consent calendar, we have no items. Item number 7, approval of the minutes for the Planning Commission meeting on August 1, 2023. Do any of the commissioners have any changes, corrections, additions, or motions?
I will move approval of the Planning Commission regular meeting of August 1st minutes as presented.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the August 1, 2023 meeting. Please vote. There we go. Okay, the motion to approve the minutes from August 1 passes 4-0-1. There are no continued items after closing a public hearing, and now to reflect the change to the calendar, we have item 10.1, which is a public hearing on escapology. We have a staff report by Annalisa Garcia. Ma'am, you have the floor.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. Tonight I will be presenting on escapology, a proposed indoor commercial recreation use. The use is proposed within City Center, located at 6,000 Bollinger Canyon Road within Suite 2400. City Center has approximately 300 square feet of floor area with 1,292 parking spaces, and the zoning district is City Center mixed use. So escapology would establish a commercial recreation facility indoor land use within an existing 4,122 square foot tenant space. The escape room experience would be for up to 8 players at one time within 7 escape rooms, ranging from 240 to 276 square feet in size. The escape room would be a guided experience with up to 25 employees on site at one time. The proposed hours of operation are Sunday through Thursday, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m., and Fridays and Saturdays from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. Here we have a proposed floor plan showing the 7 separate game rooms. On the bottom right corner is the mission control room where the rooms would be monitored. So again, the proposed use is within an existing tenant space. A game host will brief players on what to expect via an oral and short video presentation. The room will be monitored by a game master who will track the progress and provide hints if requested. And the average player spends about 1 hour on site. The zoning ordinance requires 1 parking space per 200 square feet for the indoor commercial recreation land use. And that would result in 21 required parking spaces. And the 21 parking spaces would be 5 more spaces than would be required for the retail complex shopping center rate of 1 per 250 square feet. City Center will continue to exceed required parking with existing and proposed uses. And the approved parking study determined that City Center has an excess of 82 spaces. And the conditions of approval for City Center also require the active management of parking demand. Staff's recommendation is to open the public hearing, take public testimony, close the public hearing, discuss and deliberate, and if appropriate, adopt resolution number 923, approving the proposed use permit with draft conditions of approval. And that concludes my presentation. The applicant does have a presentation. I'm happy to take comments now, or we can take the applicant's presentation.
Why don't we wait on any questions for staff until the applicant makes his presentation? That may obviate any needs to question staff. So does the applicant like to come front and center?
Before I speak, Stephanie from Sunset would like to make some opening remarks, if that's okay.
I think she's been here before.
Good evening, Chairperson Wallace and Planning Commissioners. On behalf of Sunset Development, I am Stephanie Hill. We appreciate your consideration this evening of the Escapology use permit for City Center. Escapology will contribute to the vibrancy and complement the existing retail, food and beverage, and entertainment offerings. I'm also joined by my colleagues, Jeff Dodd and Jerry Engen. We'll be able to answer any questions on behalf of Sunset. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Burton Heiss. I am CEO of Escapology. We do have a presentation. I'm happy to walk you through it briefly, but it probably is worth starting off with, does everyone know what an escape room or escape game is? Has anyone played one? Okay, it makes it a lot easier. I will tell you, prior to my time in Escapology, I had not. So I had no idea what it was about. Quickly learned that no, you are not locked in ever. You are not locked up, but rather it's a themed experience where you solve a number of puzzles. It's intellectually driven, requires cooperation. We only do private groups, so it's just your family and friends. We don't pair different groups together. And then we have a number of themes. What this gives you just some of the architectural details. We consider Escapology a premium experience. We currently have 73 venues in operation, ranging from 5 different games up to 12 games, depending on the size of the venue. The majority of those are in the US, but we do have some international locations as well. It really starts, you may have seen some escape games that I don't want to use it as a pejorative, but mom and pop, where it's just sort of built in a strip mall between a vape shop and a Domino's, and that's it. We're really looking for higher end experience, which is why someplace like Bishop Ranch is such a good fitting with what the experience we offer. When you walk in, our lobby is meant to be enjoyed. Start the experience there. Big leather couches, games to play on the table, and start the experience from the minute you enter the room or enter the facility. You already saw the layout. All of our rooms are typically in that 240 to 300 square feet, most of them divided up into 3 different rooms. As you progress through the theme, you find clues to get into that next room. Long gone are the days of locks and keys and combinations. All of ours are run by software, mag locks, DMX lighting, music, which really, again, adds to the immersive experience of what you're trying to solve for. This is a little view of the facade, again, the exterior, just to give you a sense of, we're trying to create a premium experience. I think it'll fit in really nicely with your community and with this development. These are the titles that we will have at the Bishop Ranch location, Lost City. We do have, I should mention, a number of licensed properties. We have licensing with Agatha Christie Estate, so we have Murder on the Orient Express. We have worked with Warner Brothers on Scooby-Doo and Batman, and with Paramount on Star Trek, which actually isn't going to be here. I'm sorry, Eric. Next time. We will have it at Stonestown in San Francisco. It is the wrong side of the bay. I agree. Seven Deadly Sins, Mansion Murder, and A Pirate's Curse. I chose A Pirate's Curse to maybe give you a little bit deeper idea of what our rooms look like. A Pirate's Curse takes place on a ship that has been cursed. You have until sunset, which ironically is in 1 hour, to find the treasure, or you are cursed to spend eternity on the ship. The first room, you are in the hold of the ship. The last room is the captain's quarters, has a giant 80-inch screen that looks out on the ocean where the sun is setting ever so slowly over the course of the hour. Again, adding to the experience and the immersion that we are trying to look for. So DMX lighting, all PLC controlled. A PLC is a logic basically switch that it's the same thing that's running roller coasters at Disneyland or different rides that you might go on. Same thing that we're using to drive this. What I fell in love with in this sort of in the escape game is it's an hour, it's off your screen, it's using your brain, it's cooperating and coordinating with other people around you. So I think it's a really wholesome offering that we have. I tried to run through that quick, but I will answer any questions that you have.
Do any of the commissioners have questions for staff or for the applicant? Other than to ask why not Star Trek? Okay. All right. Once you have a seat, and we'll move on to the next phase of this application, which is public comment. So let me open up public comment. First, do we have any written communication on item 10.1?
No.
Okay, number 2, do we have any hands raised to talk about item 10.1?
No.
Okay, let's move on to number 3. Do we have any speaker cards on 10.1?
Not for this item.
Okay, since no one wants to speak on this item, public comments closed. Now the fun starts. Commissioners, your chance to talk. So who wants to start off? See, if no one raises their hand, then I sort of get to be principal.
I have a quick question.
Okay,
Okay, so in the proposed project, pardon me, it says 57 players. Does that sort of imply in 7 rooms that your designated guests are 8? Is there a minimum or a maximum?
Depending on the game, there is a minimum of 2.
Okay.
And a maximum of 8. We do have some of our games that are a maximum of 6. Our average group size is 3.9 across all venues.
where do you get the 9/10 of a person?
I know it's slicing it.
Way math written up.
Yeah, no. So the other question that I have is that in the proposed project says there's no set age requirement, but they're typically 14 years or older. What is your systems for ensuring underage safety? It says you don't limit the age, but I'd like to know what sort of assurances you have should my not 14-year-old decide to get a bunch of his buddies together.
So we have a couple of different programs. We don't charge for under 7. They really can't participate in the puzzle solving, so they come along for free. Still fit into that maximum number of people we'd allow in the room. We then sort of 7 to 11, we charge, but they can participate. We also do have, but that would be with adults. We have a kids mode program where we have some of our games that they have a checklist. They're given a walkie-talkie that the game master can speak directly with them. And it's built so that for birthday parties and such, they can participate and solve it on their own. We do require one adult in the room with them. So that's how we deal with the kids. And then 14 and over are unattended if they'd like to be
The adult in the room is whom?
parent or whoever's booked.
Is it stipulated? Or
Yeah.
can I just pick up some dude in the lot and
I mean, you
come
could
in?
maybe tell us that. We wouldn't have any way of knowing, but no, typically we don't have, we've never had that happen. So I.
And so when I come in with my 14-year-olds,
Right.
or say 13-year-olds, names, addresses, how is that
Yeah, we have a
recorded?
way, you have to sign a waiver. And so if they're a minor, they have to have a adult signing that waiver for them, a guardian signing that waiver. It can be done ahead of time online. So we do a lot of birthday parties. So parents will have filled out those waivers online ahead of time.
And at any time, do you anticipate or have your staff needed to go into an escape room that had children?
We have not, well, they're available. You can see it's not a large venue if someone needed something, but they are. So we have closed circuit TV, which is watching all of the rooms. They're being monitored at all times. We can tell where they are on the props and we have voice. We can hear what there is happening in the room.
So you said the rooms were not locked. So what prevents other participants from changing rooms?
From going into a different room? They
Mhm.
could, but if it's not turned on and operating, they
Okay,
can
so
walk in and
again,
look
my
at it.
birthday party of 13-year-olds here, and here's the whatever group.
They could walk into either room.
Okay, you don't see that as a bit of a problem?
That someone could go into the room?
Yes, with my 13-year-olds.
Oh, well, I mean, we would see someone walk into the room. I mean, I hear what you're saying. You would be on the premises. There would be people there observing them. Yeah, there's really not that many people at any given time in the facility. So it's an interesting question. Not one across 73 venues that we've ever had even a inkling of some issue with. So, but that is a good question, not one I've thought of.
Think some more.
Okay.
Please.
Yeah.
We live in times that you have to, I'm a former teacher, so I have to think all these things through.
Fair enough. I would say, we'll look into what do the theaters do when they have a group of 14-year-olds come in? How do they make sure that who's sitting next to them or what have you? I think
Fine.
there's certainly a lot there to be understood. Again, this is a $50 price point per person. 85% of our customers book ahead of time online. So what we don't have is a lot of kind of people walking in, walking out. There's no waiting time. You have to book your reservation and they're all private events. So yes, someone could walk in the room. They would have to walk by a lot of people to get in to do that. It's very unlikely to see how that would happen since there's always someone at the front desk and always someone monitoring the games, but best answer I have.
I'm not entirely comfortable with an unlikely as an answer, but I will let you mull
I'm
over
trying
that one.
to think through the scenario that you're speaking of someone walking into someone else's room. I'm not sure who that person is or how they would do that, and kids wouldn't notice. Someone wouldn't alert that. I'm sorry, I have to think it through.
Fair enough,
It's
fair enough. Thank you.
Commissioner Alpert?
This is not really your application, but since you're here, I've always been curious, how often do you change rooms? Or the theme or the,
Yeah, so our franchise agreement, when it was originally written back in 2014, was to be every 3 years, then you have to change one every year. I was just telling Jeff Dodd that we actually haven't seen much demand for that because there isn't a big drop off for people using those rooms. 50% of our customers are first time game players. So we have an upgrade program where we kind of change the puzzles but keep the theme. But we don't typically, we'll more likely add more rooms if we get more space, then we have to change some out.
okay. So it'll be a while before we'll get Star Trek, I guess.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you all have some pull, so maybe we can work something out.
Well, we have a lot of rooms to get through before we're going to be just waiting for Star Trek. So I have no other questions. Thank you.
Mr. Rahman?
Hi. So Escapology is a franchisor.
This is a company owned and operated location. So we do both franchising and company owned and operated. This is company owned and operated.
Okay, so this will be company owned.
Correct.
And so are there other escape rooms in this area in Tri-Valley that can compete with this business?
There are other escape rooms here. You know, in my opinion, competition is good. Again, you typically only play an escape room once. So if another venue has 5 or 6 games, that's just 5 or 6 more, times that people might be introduced to the idea of an escape room. So there could be some competition. I will tell you that we are the largest escape room operator in the world. It also gets harder to really invest in a good game if you're only going to build it once versus you have 73 outlets that it may go into. Our Scooby is our biggest game, and I think we have that in 38 venues right now. That allows you to go out and get a licensing agreement, put a lot more research and technology into building a good game, a robust game, a safe game, all of that. So yes, there's potential for competition, but nothing that I'm concerned about.
I only ask from the perspective of this being not a viable business a year from now. There's excitement, and then after a year, the shop is sitting empty.
Right.
People are not showing up.
73 venues. We have 2 in Las Vegas. Well, actually, maybe I'll use Orlando as a better example. We just opened our second Orlando. There's 50 escape room venues in Orlando. We do combine between the two $4 million a year in revenue, and grow up year over year. So, and Orlando opened in 2014. So we don't see that as a possibility. I think escape rooms have gone way beyond trend, and they are an entertainment option that is here to stay. There's 3,000 venues in the US at this point. So that to me is not even in the realm of possibility from what we've seen, again, across 73 venues.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Curtis.
Thank you very much. So this is going next to Sandbox, is that correct?
Correct.
So I'm just looking at the price point. I'm trying to think of, we're trying to look at how we bring in medium and lower income as well. And the price point seems to maybe price people out that can enjoy this.
I don't disagree with that thought. I will tell you, we are, like I said, in a number of markets where it's clear the price point is not, an issue. Myrtle Beach. Now that's very touristy. That is different than a more, 12-month a year market. But, we're in a number of markets where it's everyday people. Now it might become more of a date night. And by the way, 2 people going to play escape game is still cheaper than the average date night. So we still think the price point works. We haven't had pushback. We do measure that. If you look at our consumer sentiment, if we get a negative sentiment, which we don't usually, we run between 4.7 and 5.0 on Google reviews across all of our venues. If we do, it's because something in the game, a prop didn't work, or there was something like that, or it was a service issue, which is completely controllable. I monitor that stuff for price all the time. And I think we don't see it because you just don't book it if that's a problem. But you look across our consumer, and it's pretty balanced. I mean, Orlando is not what I would call a high-end market. You look at what Disney's charging and how crowded they are. I was down in LA touring Universal Studios, and it was a mob scene. Mm-hmm. I mean, so many people, and you could assume that not all of them were at the highest end of the.
It's the difference between $83 a day to go for an entire day as opposed to $50 for a single hour, though.
No, true. Right. Absolutely. Some of it is supply and demand. We have not seen pushback. Our venues are in the summer, especially booked up every day, all day. Mm-hmm. So it's working, but what we have found is that there is a thrill people come out of it with. They enjoy the experience. It's creates memories. I've never had someone who I asked, have you ever played an escape game and they don't remember?
Mhm.
I don't know. I think so. They always remember and they know what it was and where it was.
No, the last question I have is, given that we just came out of a large pandemic, how do you sanitize all the areas to make sure that we're still in it's time where the COVID-19 is still spreading or whatever else it is. How do you sanitize all the areas to make sure that the lobby and everything is else?
Well, the big thing for us is sanitizing the rooms,
Mhm.
which we do in between. There's a 15-minute reset in between. Our biggest asset and what really carried us through COVID was they are private experiences. This is just your group. We are able to, there's separate seating areas in the lobby. A lot of our competitors have a very small, almost just holding area. We have a big, generous lobby, places to sit. You don't have that much interaction with a lot of our staff. You have one game host that takes you in,
Mhm.
briefs you, and comes out. So we're able to, whether it's when needed, mask up, sanitize the rooms, typical surface sanitization. We
Right.
don't have anyone eat. We don't do F&B. So that's a much bigger deal. I come from the restaurant space originally. That's a much harder environment to control
Right.
than when it's surface sanitation, which we've all learned in the restaurant business is pretty straightforward. It needs a wipe with sanitizer and you're good.
And I'd just like to go on the record that Star Wars is superior to Star Trek. So
No, that's,
Thank you for-
I have no dog in that fight.
I'll pass on Commissioner Curtis's comment on there. That's tonight for maybe a field work night. Talk about that one. Very good questions, commissioners. My view is we already have a VR experience out there in Sandbox. I don't know how well it's doing, but my view is that the person who's taking a risk on opening the business is, first of all, is the person who's renting the space. And with 73 locations, I would assume they had done a fair amount of market research to determine whether this is a viable location. And as we all know from the lectures on economic development in San Ramon we have here, this is an area where you have people who can afford to that type of a business. As I'm sure Sunset is considered, once you get people into a place like that and they're there for an hour working puzzles, what do they want to do? They want to go have a pizza or something like that. So it's going to drive foot traffic to city center, which eventually will flow into the city coffers under the sales tax. It's an indoor activity. It's not going to place a strain on the environment. So in that sense, and in other words, what goes there stays there. So I think that that's a benefit for the city. And like any other entrepreneur, they take the risk that won't work, but that's on them, not on the city. So I would guess from the comments that I've had that at least that we're to the point where we can go through the proposed resolution without committing anybody to vote in favor of the resolution. Let's go through it and then have a vote at the end and we'll see what happens. So the draft resolution is on our packet on packet page 43. So let's go through each page and see if anybody has any comments, questions, additions, or corrections. Let's start with page 1 of the resolution, which is packet page 43. Does anybody have any changes, corrections, or additions? Hearing none, let's move to packet page 44, which is the second page of the resolution. Does anyone have any changes, corrections, additions, or comments? Hearing silence, let's move on to page 3 of the resolution. Anybody have any changes, corrections, additions, or comments? No. And I would guess on page 4, no one minds if our recording secretary attests to the signature of the chair. All right, let's go on to packet page 47. That is exhibit A to the resolution, which contains the provisions for the use permit for this location. Do any of the commissioners have comments, corrections, changes, or additions to page 1? Let's go on to page 2 of exhibit A, the conditions of approval. Do we have any changes, corrections, comments, or additions to page 2 of exhibit A? Hearing none. Let's go on to page 3 of exhibit A. Do we have any changes, corrections, additions, or comments to page 3? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the resolution in the attached exhibit A.
Okay. Yes, I move to approve the resolution.
I will second the approval to move forward with this resolution and permitting.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded to approve resolution number 0-9-09-23, a resolution of the Planning Commission for the City of San Ramon approving a use permit LUP 2023-0003 for Escapology located at 6,000 Bollinger Canyon Road, Suite 2400. We now have, okay, so we get up, let's do a vote. Vote's been taken. The resolution is approved 5-0. We look forward to your new business, sir. Thank you. Next time you can talk about Chevron Park, okay? All right, let's move on to item number 9.1 on the calendar. That is our second favorite subject, which is General Plan Update 2040. Ms. Yee, you have the floor.
Great, thank you. Let me just take a minute here to update the PowerPoint. Okay. So this evening, I'm here to present the General Plan 2040 update and the various applications associated with the General Plan. Tonight is the third in a series of public hearings that we're holding on the project. Tonight's meeting will expand on the discussions from May 30th joint public hearing that we held with the City Council, as well as the August 15th Planning Commission meeting. The focus of this evening's conversation are centered on the last 7 elements of the general plan. At our August 15th meeting, we covered economic element, land use, and growth management. And so we're continuing with a review of the remaining chapters. Even though we covered generally these elements at our joint session, we thought it would be helpful to have a meeting that would be dedicated to some of these specific chapters that if there are questions, we could take a little bit more time to talk through some of the edits and amendments that are being proposed. In addition to those 7 elements, we're also covering the changes that are being made to the San Ramon Village specific plan. And then after tonight's meeting, our recommendation is to continue the public hearing to September 5th, where we'll keep talking about the general plan update as well as all the associated applications. So again, just a brief overview on the element revisions. Each element has background and narratives that have been updated for each topic. They identify some broad goal guiding policies, and then there's a series of implementing policies that achieve the city's goals and objectives. Staff's recommending various edits and clarifications throughout the elements, and then track changes provided at the May 30th joint public hearing identifies those proposed track changes to the 2035 plan. So all of the elements start with the general plan 2035 as the current adopted document, and then all the amendments proposed are what's being proposed as the new general plan 2040. So rolling right into traffic and circulation element, this element was last updated in 2018. There have been some edits made to various policies that speak to implementation, traffic technology, and then traffic guidelines, and addressing accessibility and mobility for special needs groups. This element has gone through a series of reviews, not only public participation at various venues, but also specifically with the city's Transportation Advisory Committee. We've met with them twice now regarding this particular update to this element. And out of those committee meetings, we did get some feedback on adding a new policy that wasn't included in your original May 30th draft. So that's identified in the staff report. And then some other just clarifications and readability comments that were provided. All of those refinements that were recommended that should be included in the general plan update will be added as an errata table. And you'll be able to see what those edits are in the final draft document before we ask you to approve it. So you'll be able to see where each of those changes are going to be inserted in based on the process that's occurred since we released that document for your review on May 30th. So everything that will change to the document since May 30th will be in that final draft before we ask you to adopt. Parks and recreation element. Again, this element builds on parks and recreation strategies and priorities. The last time this element was updated was in 2015. And really the amendment recognizes the evolution of how parks and recreation facilities are designed and built and managed these days. We did bring the element to the Parks Commission for their review once in September of last year to get feedback on the direction of the policies, and then the full element itself at their July meeting. There are a number of recommendations that came out of those two meetings, a number of edits that recommended more active language be included in, being mindful of enforcement challenges, and all of those refinements that are recommended to be included in that draft update will be, again, found in the errata table. Then the public facilities and utilities element. This is an element that looks at aspects relating to specific functions and needs of the community, and identifies the capital improvements and facilities that are needed to serve Saramone. This was last updated in 2015 and continues to maintain the city's goal to provide a safe, healthy, and attractive environment. We don't have a public facilities and utilities committee yet, so the Planning Commission is the one that really provides us that feedback. It's in the public, and then it moves on to City Council. Open space and conservation element. This last was updated in 2015. The element focuses on the open space strategies and priorities for the city. The draft still continues to maintain the goals to preserve, acquire, manage, protect, and maintain open space, as well as limiting development within the urban growth boundary. We do have an open space advisor committee that did have an opportunity to provide us feedback on the policies as well as the full draft. The committee felt that the elements should consider maintaining a broader vision of open space throughout the planning area. A lot of the policies currently have focuses on within the urban growth boundary and directly adjacent, but there is some additional policies that not necessarily specific policy inclusions, but just in general that the element could use a broader vision. They also recommended including maps for targeting parcels for preservation and incorporating language that would reinforce the Open Space Advisory Committee's role in the general plan. And so at this time, there are no further changes that are recommended to the element, but open space priorities continue to be implemented directly by the City Council. And as we get that direction, the element will give us the opportunity to be flexible with how we implement that direction. Next chapter is the housing and safety element chapter. The housing and safety element chapter establishes the mechanisms to reduce death, injury, property damage and economic and social dislocation that results from hazards. Hazards include, earthquakes and fire risk, things like that. The update to this element, since it was last updated in 2015, includes some new information on how we can better be prepared for emergencies, evacuation routes, climate change, and new policies that address risks that's associated with climate change. Noise element sets forth the policies that regulate the ambient noise environment and minimizes residents from exposure to unacceptable noise levels. In the element, you'll find different noise contour maps, and those have been updated to understand what the current noise situation is and what it will look like at general plan build out. And so updates just include clarification, some additional readability edits to the policies and implementation guide policies. And then the last chapter that we're covering tonight is the air quality and greenhouse gas element. This element provides a platform within the general plan for local action to address all the various legal air quality and climate change requirements. The primary revisions relate to updates to state law, toxic air contaminants, and edits to various goals and policies related to air quality and greenhouse gas emissions. Updates to the climate action plan, which is a separate document from the general plan, is currently underway. But we see that as a document that implements the policies within the air quality and greenhouse gas element. That next steps that we have for the climate action plan is going to be reviewing those greenhouse gas reduction measures that will ultimately be incorporated into the CAP. And then we're going to work through the public review process for an anticipated CAP adoption in early 2024. It's kind of, the CAP is kind of like the companion guide to the air quality element, as zoning is ordinance as a companion guide to the land use element. So that's another way to kind of think about how those documents work. Amendments to the San Ramon Village specific plan. So this was the last topic that we wanted to discuss this evening, specifically focused on the changes that are being proposed with the San Ramon Village specific plan. There are several text and map amendments that will have to be made, and primarily those changes are the result of housing element adoption requirements that we need to implement as part of the general plan. So the housing element directed the city to make a couple of changes, both on housing opportunity sites and adding new housing opportunity sites within the specific plan area. And then we also, because of state law, have to look at whether those density ranges support affordable housing minimums that the state has set. And so the first change is related to the current multifamily residential density range in the specific plan. Right now it's 18 to 28, and the new range would be 20 to 30. That was introduced when we talked through the housing element adoption process, that the state requires at least a minimum of 20 dwelling units per acre in order for us to be able to reasonably assume that it can be redeveloped with affordable housing. So that's one of the changes you'll see throughout the text edits. We're also taking this opportunity to update the reference to 2035 to 2040, but then there are also some land use updates that have been made to 2040, some definitions that were referenced specifically in the specific plan that we now just have to make sure that they're consistent between the specific plan document and the general plan document. The third change is related to residential overlays. We kind of discussed this at our last meeting about the Clovis versus there's a lawsuit that and a decision that was made with the city of Clovis, and given the potential ramifications of having a residential overlay, because the specific plan currently has an adopted overlay, we're taking this opportunity to remove that and replace it with just a residential designation on any of the sites that are housing opportunity sites. We do also then have the opportunity, because not all of the residential overlay covers housing opportunity sites. Some of the parcels do not have a housing opportunity site on them. For example, like Beta Court area does not have a housing opportunity site. So we're also taking this opportunity to take off the residential overlay on any parcels that are not a housing opportunity site, and those will go back to just what the base designation is. And really that is primarily in the area north of Faria Preserve Parkway. So everything south of Faria Preserve Parkway, along Deerwood, along San Ramon Valley Boulevard, they don't have an overlay currently in that area. So none of the overlay really affects any land use changes that will happen there. And then the last update is to 2810 Crow Canyon Road. As we were updating the San Ramon Village specific plan back in 2020, has it been that long? 2021. There was direction from the Planning Commission at that time that at some point when the general plan gets updated, we want to revisit the park designation on that parcel, because we're no longer extending Twin Creeks Drive through that parcel, that there was the opportunity when we could do those changes concurrently to make that update from a park designation to business mixed use. So you'll see that reflected on the land use map. So the last slide here, just our next steps following tonight's hearing. We're expecting that public hearings will continue through this fall. September 5th would be the next opportunity for the Planning Commission to meet. And if we've wrapped up the elements discussion and we've wrapped up the San Ramon Village specific plan, our goal is to move into conversations about the zoning ordinance update and those related housing implementation changes that have to occur in the zoning ordinance. So our goal, at least on September 5th, is we can continue to revisit any of the other elements that we've covered along with the ones that we've talked about here. But we'll probably focus on zoning ordinance updates, things like our promise to update our missing middle program and the edits that would have to be made to the zoning ordinance related to that. Edits to add in the new mixed use, downtown mixed use categories will have to go into the zoning ordinance because we're adding those as part of the general plan update. So there's that zoning ordinance edits are the companion to the general plan land use updates that we're doing. And then once you have that in front of you in September, we're going to then follow up with the general plan environmental impact report, the draft of that at a subsequent meeting after September 5th. So we'll have a lot more opportunity to talk about the general plan, but kind of just setting the stage as far as where we think we're headed. We have gotten a number of comments and we've also had the opportunity to meet individually with planning commissioners to get a better understanding of what additional areas we might have to focus on for our next couple of meetings. So with that, if there's any feedback on things that you'd like for us to bring back at the next meeting to revisit, or more topics that you'd like us to walk through, please let us know, and we'll definitely be able to cover those at the next meeting. And that's it.
Hang on. Before we let Ms. Yee go down back to her seat, do any of the commissioners have any questions?
Chair, I'd like to suggest that perhaps we listen to public comments and then we move into our questions, just so we're not redundant and we can clarify any public comments that may come up tonight. So, as an option, it's just a suggestion,
I don't have a particular objection to that. No pun intended. How do the other commissioners feel about that? Okay, the consensus is we'll go to public comment. Now you can sit down.
Thank you.
All right. So let me open public comment and I won't hit it so hard next time. All right, so let's start out with the written communications. Do we have any written communications on item 9.1 that come under public comment?
Written communication was received from Bob Peoples and the law offices of Gagan McCoy.
Okay. Those have both been received by all the commissioners. Item number 2, do we have any people in the audience raising their hand for oral discussion outside the premises?
No.
Okay, item number 3, those persons who wish to physically address the planning commission, now is your opportunity.
Ty wants the country.
Hello, commissioners, and welcome back, Mr. Wallace. So I have been following all the updates that Ms. E has been going to different committees. And I had to spend $60 of my good money to buy all these. And it's kind of appalling that tonight you are asked to approve 7 chapters of the entire general plan, which my understanding is that there are 12 chapters plus specific plan. I feel it is too daunting for you guys to approve all in one session. I wish for you to take each topic as piecemeal to make it credible and to taxpayers like me, that everything has been properly vetted. The reason why I would like you to do that is because a lot of the revisions is very concerning. For example, on 4.2 of tonight's agenda packet, it has changed the density of multifamily residential from 18 to 20 minimum and from 28 to 30 as maximum. I am very concerned about who exactly is authorized to make these kind of standard change. Usually these need to be someone who is a trained professional. None of Ms. E's staff report has ever disclosed what kind of authority she is depending on to make these standard, quote unquote, revision and updates. It's very concerning. You do not want tofu construction because of the general plan that someday the wind blows and you have collapsed multi-family housing. Furthermore, I find the overall author in terms of legal verbiage of this general update revision extremely cocky. This person in the introduction wants to revise this plan for all the way up to 2040. I feel that it is completely out of your commissioner's capacity as well as the city's power really to update something that is close to 2 decades ahead. That the most that a taxpayer like me can accept really should be up to 2030. So I really would like this commissioner to please ask the staff to disclose who is the authority that revised these standards and who is the author of the legal revision updates of this general plan. And furthermore, please do not approve anything. You should consider every single chapter by piecemeal, by topic matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speaker cards? No?
No.
Okay, and that being the case, I'm going to close public hearing. All right. So let's first of all start. You don't have to get up yet unless someone raises their hand and wants to ask questions. Although I will warn you, I have a couple. But how about my fellow commissioners? Do you have some questions of Ms. Yee? Commissioner Alpert, you're on deck.
I do want to ask, is it the chair's pleasure that we all provide questions on a specific chapter? Or do you want us to shotgun all of them at one time?
Well, let's ask Ms. Yee which ones that she would prefer, like element by element or just shotgun.
I'm not opposed to a shotgun. I think that at least a number of the chapters do have some relatively updated language, but they may not necessarily raise any issues or concerns. So I leave that to the commission to tell me if you have any concerns with those chapters. But if there's ones that you want to focus on, I know there some are more dear to some of your hearts than others. So we can start there and can shoot away.
Okay, so I'm going to settle back in my chair and let you go for it, Commissioner Alpert.
And I'm allowed to just go each of the chapters. I have questions.
However you want to go.
Okay. I did ask. Okay. First of all, we've had a number of pretty detailed and somewhat complex public comments that have been shared with us. And specifically, we've had something from the retail shopping center developers. We've had something on Church of the Valley. We've had Mr. Peoples' 2 memos with suggestions throughout the plan. And then we had one today on the El Nido Trust. I guess my question is, what is the suggested or anticipated process for, plotting through those and soliciting any feedback that you might need from the Planning Commission? Because I feel like those could be a long discussion all by themselves.
The best way to answer that is that we've collected a lot of comments over the last 2 years through this process. We started July 2021, and every comment that the city receives, we do read each one of those. And as we are gearing to update each of the elements, we have those in mind as far as is there merit to include some of the edits or typos or changes that somebody's suggesting? Are some of these just feedback as opposed to specific changes that they want to make? So we read each and every one of those, and it's the same with the committees and commissions that we're addressing and meeting with, so that all of those are taken into consideration. The comments that have received before the May 30th meeting, our expectation is that the public review draft incorporated a lot of the feedback that we received before the release of the public draft. And then now we've received, since the release of that May 24th dated public review draft document, that we've received some additional comments. I think my recommendation would be that similar to all the other public comments that we received before May 30th, staff is continuing to review those. And then when we bring you the errata changes, at least all the direct feedback that we've received from the Planning Commission and the committees and commissions, we have incorporated as many of those as we can, and then explained why some of those have not been able to be incorporated. But as far as the public comments that we've received, I'd recommend that the Planning Commission give us some direction on if you think there's merit for us to further evaluate those and incorporate those edits, or if you've just considered those comments received and we move on to the next edits that you'd like for us to make. But it's kind of no different than all the public comment received. Some of them are just infeasible for us to include in, or may not make sense, or different than the city's goals and policies. And other ones, the Planning Commission may consider you'd like for us to study more. So for example, at our last meeting, there was direction after the close of public comment that you'd like for staff to look into the 25% non-retail ratio. And so we are contacting the property owners that had submitted that letter to look at where changes may be made with that. And then that will be presented at a future meeting before we ask for the adoption. So if there's any specific comments that we've received that you'd like for us to provide you our opinions on, we can certainly do that either tonight or in a future staff report.
That would not be a question. That would be a statement at the end. So I will reserve that. Moving on to the chapter on traffic. And this was just really a question that kind of got raised for me, at least. The PUC's decision on allowing Waymo to expand self-driving cars in San Francisco. If somebody came to San Ramon and wanted to do something like that. Do we have, or do we need policies in the general plan on how to handle that? And the answer could be no. It was a question,
I don't think that we do need those, but the city has already embarked. We have a transportation division within our public works department, and they have been approached by a number of different autonomous vehicle operations and have done some testing and things based on that division and council's direction on whether or not we want to explore that. So it would be no different than the autonomous vehicle testing perhaps that was being done in Bishop Branch, kind of follows that same process. So nothing in the general plan, I think
Okay.
that we would need to include into potentially.
Anticipate. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, that was just a question. The parks chapter, I had a couple of questions there. Maybe I need to point you to where I'm kind of hanging out on here. It was the table 6.3 that had the inventory of current and proposed parks. Well, depending on how you count, remember we got a second copy. It's actually page 6 of the chapter on parks. And it might be page 119 of the staff report of May 30th, but there were 2 versions that got sent out. So, but I know it's page 6 of where the tables start.
Okay. And I'm sorry, the question was.
Okay. I'm getting to that. I didn't have to ask that question. Can you remind me where is Athey lot? Athey.
The Athey lot. So Athey lot is going to be actually within the San Ramon Village specific
Okay.
plan
Mhm.
area. That's the parcel that the city owns directly across the street from at the intersection of Ryan Industrial Court.
Okay.
So
Okay. And the site formerly known as Culligan and now a pottery store of some sort. Is that right?
right,
Okay.
adjacent to that.
Okay. So, jumping to the San Ramon, I'm still on Athey lot, the San Ramon Village specific plan land use map. Should there be a green bubble there someplace around there on the map to show that there's a potential park there? And maybe it is in a little,
Yeah, so
is that those little shady green things, is that what that is?
right, the land use map.
That would be
Sorry, let
packet
me get
page
to the
21 of
packet
tonight.
page.
Yeah, packet page 21 of tonight's
Yes.
packet.
So packet page 21 does identify the park designation on that parcel. Parks can be either privately owned or publicly owned. So Athey lot, it's kind of right underneath the that dense cropping of trees there, but it is in green currently. So the Athey is identified as a park designation.
Okay, so it's the squiggly green as opposed to a solid green on
Right.
this drawing. Perfect. Okay, that just helps. And then still on parks. Now, I'm sorry, jumping back. Just wanted to answer that one question over there. Now I'm really am on table 6.3 and the planned and proposed parks. Is it correct to assume Chevron Orchards doesn't exist yet as far as the plan and the park element? So, and that's why we don't see a potential central or whatever it's going to be called park as part of the inventory of parks?
That's correct, because right now it still is an administrative
That's right.
office designation.
Okay.
And so until we really get the direction beyond just the alternative, that you want that to be downtown mixed use south and include park space, we won't have the maps changed or the tables to recognize potential future park space
Thank
there.
you. Asked, answered perfectly. Then the other question is really more of a conceptual question, and that's the role of open space in the calculation of the goal not standard goal of 4.5 or 6 acres per. And I noticed that we do now are including, 100 and something acres for Big Canyon and 13 acres for laborers and the PG&E corridor as part of the calculation to get to the total number of acres, it appears. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. Is that how we've always treated open space and kind of getting to that number, or is it new this time?
So this is probably worth just walking through that table. So the table is existing, proposed, or under construction parks. We have existing parks in the city that are included in the existing park acreage, and then some parks that are currently under construction that are primarily like both active and passive parks. All of our community parks, neighborhood parks, all of that is added into that total acreage number. We have some future parks that we anticipate through either development or through donations to the city, however those parks can come to be protected, established parks, that those are recognized as potential future parks. And over time, we've had some discussions with both property owners, as well as because some parcels are adjacent to existing parks, like 8th Lot, is adjacent to Culligan's is adjacent to 8th Lot. One of the goals one day is maybe the old Culligan site could also look at being encouraged to become a park. So there are a number of future parks that the city would like to think that are ideal sites for parks to be added into our overall acreage. That acreage number, the 669 acres, is not does not include open space. So this is actually the Big Canyon Preserve and the Labor's parcel or actual park acreage that would be fit into one of the definitions of community park, neighborhood park, publicly owned, privately owned, publicly accessible, all the 5 different types of parks that we have in the city. There is potentially open space acreage that spans beyond that 160 acres in Big Canyon, or beyond the 13 acres at the Laborers, because Laborers owns well more than 13 acres or their proposed development area. They own hundreds of acres. And so within the hundreds and so acres that they own, our hope is that by designating future park, that would plant the seed of, we'd like to see about 13 acres coming from the Laborers parcel as a future park site. So it's one of those looking at past interests, where development patterns are going, how much acreage could potentially be donated as parkland. The park acreage is simply just parks as defined by what the city calls as park. There's potentially other open space, but the only acreage that we're counting in that 6.2, 6.3 table are just parkland.
In this case, it's land that is probably going to not be a neighborhood park or a school park, I'm guessing, because there's not really a school there.
Right. So
but-
potentially a community park or a specialized recreational park.
Right.
Potentially, we have a number of those that don't quite fit into the bubble or
Okay.
definition.
Okay, so that helps. That explains the calculation, the math and everything. Okay. And then jumping all the way to the safety element, is there any guidance on general plans these days that the safety element needs to include a section around public health? And I'm thinking as a result of, obviously the COVID-19 pandemic, have we been given guidance on now needing to include any language in there about how to address that or react to that?
So we don't, there is no state requirement to have a public health component of the general plan. If the city wanted to add an element or a chapter or paragraphs related to public health, we could always do that. This general plan update is primarily addressing housing element changes. And so all of the changes that we're making in part is driven because of the housing element update. It doesn't preclude us from adding public health discussions in there, but We just haven't had the direction to.
Sure.
to
It really
add
wasn't an optional question. It was really more a question because a lot of the element changes are really dictated also by state law changes. And there's plenty of those that have been captured in here. And I was just curious if there was a public health, requirement at this point. It's not, trust me, it's not a desire to make the document longer. Okay, I think that's it for my questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Alpert. Commissioner Ahmed, you're up.
Thank you, Cindy. So on the traffic chapter on my package, page 91, there's talk about Vision Zero. And efforts have begun to integrate Vision Zero. You see that? I don't know if you have the same page or not. I will, if you could just expand on the whole Vision Zero and what efforts have been taken to sort of integrate Vision Zero as a standard practice.
Is that, what elements are you in? May 30th.
Yeah, May
packet.
30th.
Okay, I see. So, this is transportation and
Transportation.
circulation element. I see.
I'm more focused on the efforts have begun to integrate the efforts. I'm on page 91 of the package for May 30th.
Sorry. One behind here. So I know the recommended language was added through our Public Works Department. And I know that they are on.
Deb is on the
on the
so
call.
we'll
So
promote her.
yeah, why don't we see if she can provide you some feedback on what efforts have begun?
Can you hear me?
Promoted her.
I'm sorry.
Deb Fair is promoted.
Okay. Ms. Fear, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, loud and clear.
All right, I apologize for not turning on my video. I'm having some issues with bandwidth, so I don't want to be jumpy. We do not currently have an official Vision Zero plan, although we practice Vision Zero as much as we possibly can, but we are in process of creating a Vision Zero plan.
Which means what? You're in the process.
Okay, sorry. We are working to get a consultant to assist us. It's so we're in the beginning stages of putting together like a proposal to send to, or to put out to request proposals. And once we get a consultant on board, then we'll put together a document.
Okay. Okay. Gonna move on then to a different topic. Okay.
Yep.
On page 104, we talk about cities' TDM programs. Could you elaborate, especially when you're working with the employers with 50 and more employees? This is talking about section 5.6-1-2. Encourage and assist major employers and property managers of commercial sites with 50 or more employees to reduce the number of single occupant vehicles by participating in the city's TDM program. If you can elaborate on this particular point.
Sure. Let me start, and then if there's anything that our transportation counterparts can add to answer your question. So we do have a transportation planning division within our Public Works Department, and they regularly meet with employers, major employers, and really have the major partnership with Bishop Ranch is primarily one of the biggest components of our city's TDM program. So we provide information to each of those larger employers about all the various transportation alternatives to just getting into your vehicle. So that includes promotion of van pool, carpool, the bus service, or how to then get from your home to your place of work in Saramone and back. So a lot of that information is provided through our transportation planners and working with those businesses so that they can then disseminate that to their employees, so that to encourage them to use an alternative mode of transportation.
So if we look at this Bollinger Canyon, where there's going to be a lot of homes, Orchard Park, Sunset Development going to the left, then the senior citizen. Someone yesterday was asking me, knowing that I'm planning commissioner, what is going to happen with the traffic situation here? And he's the executive at Chevron, and he was just wondering what he lives here also, and he was saying, what are the plans here to sort of loosen the traffic congestion, potential congestion?
So yeah, no, great question. TDM is one major factor of that, but it inherently, by putting additional homes within the core of the city, the goal is that we're reducing the vehicle miles traveled. So the need for somebody to get into their vehicle and to drive to their place of work because of proximity would then place them closer to their employment and not have to get in their car to drive there. But also there are a number of measures and policies that we have in place that support the existing people that also live here. So we're constantly doing improvements and looking at things like signal timing, adding that through lane that gets onto the freeway. Those are all the different implementation measures that have been taking place to try to continue to get that flow of traffic moving as quickly as possible, even though we're adding additional units into the city. But I don't know if transportation can speak more to some of that, but or if that answers your question.
If there's some more comments they can give us, that'll be fine, but sure.
Hi,
Is it-
it's a great question. And we are actually waiting for the traffic study to be prepared before we really can answer that question. Because there's a lot of things that in our toolbox that are available to us, but without specific information that would come out of the traffic study. I can't give you a pinpoint answer tonight.
And just to expand on that, as Deb mentioned, traffic studies really provide us with the information that we need on how much traffic is going to be generated with each project and how many trips are associated with each project. And so we have an opportunity with each project that we review to look at what mitigations can be incorporated into that project to address any traffic congestion that may occur along the roadways because of the project that's being added. So right now we're at a what I would consider a programmatic level as far as our general plan sets the program for having policies in place that require things like traffic studies with each new development project that triggers, X number of peak trips. And then with each project that gets reviewed, we're reviewing that traffic impact to determine, are there additional measures that have to be added with the project to address circulation?
Okay, so going back to my question on the Vision Zero, and I know there's steps being taken. I just want to make a comment that a few months ago, 2 boys were killed in a car accident, and I believe the accident actually happened in Dublin, but they were speeding through Dorothy all the way to Dublin in a BMW, and they happened to be my relatives. And those two boys were killed. And, I know the police chief is looking into this in traffic department, but I really would like to sort of the traffic division or department take into study how to avoid these speedings by high schoolers at nighttime on these lonely streets on the weekends. Because, I know we, as parents, we have an obligation to tell our kids, but at times we can't. And, they don't listen to us. So undertaking a study, or how do we avoid these, and within this Vision Zero strategy, you have to eliminate all traffic accidents and severe injuries. And that's a tragedy for a family losing 2 kids. So just my comment.
Well, first, I'm sorry for your family's loss. I mean, that's a terrible thing to have to live through, especially to lose kids. But thank you for your comments and thoughts. Let's go down the table. Commissioner Kuznick.
I have a few comments. And let me start with back to traffic here. Sorry. I went from marking up the book to a separate page here, just to simplify. And I would like to say that the theme that will come up in my comments here are going to revolve around, kind of taking in the situation, what happened in Maui. So as I go through the different elements, there will be things that will be a recurring theme for me. Starting with traffic, safety, those sorts of things. Because I think right now we've all been made aware that when we're dealing with traffic and we're dealing with safety, that I would like to feel that we have an opportunity and an obligation to get honest about evacuation routes, how we deal with emergencies, and this growing trend in cities to continue to shrink down streets, to shrink down private roads, and to allow for the barest minimum of access points, egress. Really, we need to stop and really think about it. What we saw happening both in California a few years ago and just recently in Maui is a cautionary tale for all of us about how we look at these evacuation routes. So that will be a theme for me, and I'm stalling to try to find the page where I asked my question, which I may have to just move on to the ones that I can find. Apologize. I think that goes to the net zero. I'll move on to the comments that I have dealing with open space, the open space element, because that's the next one on my notes here. So here's my first question. As I'm reading through the open space element, it talks about removing special status species. So my question, this is figure 8-1A and 1B. By what authority can a special status species be removed as we look at open space? I was not consistent enough to put the page number when I started writing these notes, so I apologize. Oh, okay. Page 147.
That's from May 30.
Yep, okay,
Okay, sorry.
thank you, that helps.
Is this popped up in the graphics? I do have page numbers for all the rest. Apologize.
So special species status, so we are on packet page 147. There's a heading under special species status. And there's a definition as far as what's considered a special species. That's directed under the Federal Fish and Wildlife Service is who defines what is considered a special species. What species have special species status.
Okay, so the fact that we've stricken plant species out of this has come from an authority higher than just us.
That's right. So, let's see, that goes on to page 148. So in the new graphics, you'll see, at least in that planning area, we don't have any of those, plant species that are in, our planning area. And so they're not, at least based on the information that the states provided us, that they don't, they're not within the city planning area.
Thank you. On the same portion on page 153, the question, this is actually underneath is it a guideline? Sorry. Implementing policy 8.1-I-4, where there is the explanation. And this happens a few times in this element where the difference between a planning area versus a city limits. And when I reread this time, there's a lot more reference to a city limit versus planning areas. So I'm kind of curious as to which way are we leaning these days? Do we want to just look at open space in the city, or are we looking at open space in our planning area as we go through this open space element?
So if there's a specific reference to planning area, then or city limit, then that policy is related to whatever specifically specified. If there are general policies, let's say 8.3-I-6, there's that policy says new development shall provide open space throughout the dedication of land through the use of the irrevocable instrument or payment of impact fees. If that, let's say that development isn't currently in the city limits, but is being proposed to be annexed into the city, they're in our planning area. If it doesn't specify if it's city or planning area, we apply that policy to the entire planning area.
Okay. And I previously asked the question about the resource conservation overlay, and my initial question was this impacted by the overlay law change from Clovis? And I've been assured that it does not. So no harm, no foul on that one. And then on page 164 in the open space. Okay. Where am I? 164. Oh, here we go. 8.4-I-13. I just want to again voice my strong consideration that where we had improvements may include work related to the geological hazard abatement district, trails, or replanting of native plants. And I would like to just to continue to emphasize this. This is again a fallout of watching the impact of the Maui fires, where we have native species that are drought tolerant and fire resistant, and that at every possible opportunity that should be made a priority and maintained and strengthened for all of our sakes. Okay. I love my oak trees. All right. All right, safety element, page 180. Okay. This deals with evacuation routes, where it talks about that there are currently 4 neighborhoods that only have one or that have fewer than 2 access points. But I also know that we've seen a project come before us in which we've raised this concern about an evacuation point. And so I'd like to describe that we can't just be, I would like us to not be cavalier about this issue of evacuation routes. You know, we can all think it's never going to happen here until it does. And then we go, oops, my bad. So I think we do have this opportunity and an obligation to really be very directed about how we manage that and how we are going forward with managing evacuation routes.
Through the chair, if I just might on that, because it is kind of a sensitive topic. Policy that we have included as part of the general plan update 9-1 I8 does
Nine.
actually reference the evacuation plan that's been developed by the fire district and the city of San Ramon.
Okay.
To identify and update the evacuation plan every 8 years. And there's a discussion that goes into that. So we have addressed that as part of this general plan.
Okay, great.
And is an ongoing effort and
Thank
is actually posted on the fire district's website, it appears.
Okay,
So,
fantastic. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Page 183. What talks about encouraging home retrofits to current building standards on structure hardening. Is that the only place we are looking at retrofits to harden them? I guess single access residential neighborhoods or residential developments.
what policy is that?
This is 9.1-I-6.
Packet page 183 of
Yes.
the May 30 packet.
My numbers are all different for some reason.
Sorry, yeah.
Oh,
Policy,
you got-
policy 9.1-I-6,
Yeah.
I believe.
Did I say 8? I'm sorry. Okay. Oh, I said 6. Oh, well. Right, my bad.
Yeah, so it would be just those that are identified at this point in time. And it would be a new program that would be added to by the Building and Safety Department. And that could be done through when they come in for remodels and such.
When we talk about hardening, a structure hardening, is there a definition for that? Do you guys, I can imagine one. Do we have something that,
Yeah, we can provide some more information on that. We'll bring it
okay,
back.
thank you,
Next
appreciate that.
It's maybe in the building code also, but let us get some clarification on it.
Wildfire interface. Big extra steps. Basically creating barriers.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, and then the last comment, I have 2 more sections I'm going to comment on, but the last comment that I have about the safety element. And I'm going to pose this sort of as a somewhat general question. And as we are infilling and trying to reduce vehicle miles traveled and getting people out of the cars, if we are increasing and increasingly limit or increasing no cars, how do we ensure there's adequate evacuation systems, especially in new developments with smaller street size and fewer car ownerships? So I think we're all on board with trying to get people out of their cars, but have we forgotten that sometimes having a car is really life-saving? So that's a rhetorical comment for me. All right, I have 2 more comments. If I'm going for it. Page 195. In the May 30th packet. All right, here we go. And this deals with the 100-year flooding. So have we gotten anything from FEMA about any modifications on our 100-year floodplain based on the last season's rain, the 22-23 Stormageddon?
Not based on 22-23. The information's from so on packet page 196, that's the map for the FEMA flood zones. we have a variety of sources that we get that information from, including FEMA. The FEMA information is dated 2020, but then we also have city information as well that layers on top of that, between 2020 and 2021 that we're taking that information from. So the FEMA maps haven't changed since 2020, but I don't know if they're how often, to be honest, how often they update those maps.
Is that something that we ought to just briefly take a look at, since we did have a lot of flooding in San Ramon this past rain season?
Yeah, we can get a better answer for you as far as how often that changes, and if there's special circumstances that may require FEMA to then update their maps more than just occasionally.
Yeah, I
So
just didn't know if we
we'll
had,
give an update.
based on having FEMA help out with the post flooding issues, if they had come back and says, you know, your 100-year floodplain needs to be modified. And then my final comment on 212. I think this is a replay on 212. 9.6-I-5. And I'm going to bring this one up about really limiting the removal of existing drought tolerant and native species, and really focusing on that which is already creating resilience in our areas where there's, you know, existing trees that really help reduce the heat island effect and energy demands, and that I would love to see the city be much more assertive in not just utilizing green infrastructure, but to maintain and preserve those trees and plants that are already doing this work for us as we look forward to how our city will be changing. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Curtis.
Thank you. First question I have is, I look at the language in the entire general plan. We use the word support, we use the word encourage, we use the word promote. What's the difference between those, and how do you measure any of them that you're successful? Because they all are very broad and can have a different kind of variation of what that means. So I'm trying to figure out, what does that mean for the city that we're trying to support or encourage or promote these types of policies and so forth, and how we're going to measure that we actually are successful as a city getting to this 2040 general plan.
Where do I begin? I guess where I start off with is that the general plan document, to a certain degree, is meant to provide a bit of flexibility where flexibility is allowed, where there may be different implementation tools that are available over that 20-year time frame that we're projecting out, that and different resources that are available over that 20-year span, that can so that flexibility sometimes needs language that's a little bit more broad, where and you'll find that with almost all of the general plans that are in other cities, is that we generally take a broader approach, at least with the general plan, as far as providing the guidance, and then the implementation tools, like I've mentioned, climate action plan, the zoning ordinance, these evacuation plans, some of those things would then be on an annual basis. Both the council sets objectives and goals for the year, when we target updates to those documents that I mentioned, walking district plan, parks master plan, all of those things have work plans that are associated with implementation of these broader goals that are identified. And so there are going to be some policies that specifically require, where we've been given direction through this public review process, that the decision-making bodies want specific language that is very clear and direct. And then, based on your direction, if support does not go go far enough, that we can replace that with other language that, based on your direction, to strengthen those policies or to make them more concise. So we're taking an existing document and building that into the next 2040 update. But if there are areas that you think are need strengthening of that language or loosening of that language to give this the city or whoever's responsible for that policy more flexibility to address that, we do revisit how we are measuring up to the policies that we've identified on an annual basis through our general plan annual update and report. And that's oftentimes an opportunity for us to report back, something like this says support green infrastructure. And then we can actually provide a report that says on these 3 capital improvement projects, we've been able to incorporate green infrastructure as part of implementation of that goal. So that's generally how some of this works, but there may be some budgetary constraints that year that the capital improvement project does not allow for us to add budget to support green infrastructure. And we may try to get a private project to partner with the city that will continue to support. But if we were to, let's say, require green infrastructure, and we're not able to meet that requirement on an annual basis, then you have to then actually allocate funding and budget to meet those requirements. So it's a blueprint, not just for developers who may want to build in the city or businesses that want to come to the city, but it's also a blueprint for the city that we have to follow to make sure that these goals are being met.
Thank you. I guess for me, I just think the language should be the same. We either should be encouraging, promoting, or supporting, because they're all basically the same ideology, right? I mean, I can encourage you, I can support you, and I can promote you. It's all kind of the thing. I just think that we should try to figure out what that is, because if I'm reading this as an individual, I may not know what the thought process is behind those, because I don't have the explanation in front of me like what you were just able to provide. So just something to think about. Then I also have a question on packet page from May of 2023, 121 on item 6.5-I-1. And it says the total of 6.1 acres of 1,000 residents guideline. But then we also have on packet page 119, it says 6.0 acres of 1,000. And then it also talks about 6.5 acres of 1,000 residents. So are those, which number are we trying to get to?
Sure. So where the current general plan, as far as parkland, we're at 4.72. So hopefully that's consistent in the document.
Yeah.
So we're currently at 4.72. Based on the existing under construction, future anticipated, proposed parkland, we can count up to 6.0 acres per 1,000 residents that we expect at general plan build out. Once we build out all of what has been identified in the land use map, that we'll get to 6.0. We have traditionally in our growth management element had a performance standard that has now been changed to a performance guideline of how many acres that the city would like to have per 1,000 residents. our goal has always been 6.5. And so we continue to strive to get to 6.5 acres per thousand by putting that as our performance guideline and the city's desire to get to 6.5, even though we know we can only get to 6.0. It sets an opportunity as new developments come into the city where we can identify, are there more opportunities to add parkland with a project to then get us closer to 6.5. So right now we can expect, with all of the development that we expect and the population that we're going to grow and the number of future parks that we can see on the map that would fit in the city, there's we're getting to 6.0, but our goal is to get to 6.5 and continuing to offer that as a goal for the city to try to attain.
Thank you. Then is a question also just on the in the same area, chapter 6. And maybe this is a twofold question. So when a new residential area is built out and there is a need for a new school, does that construction company provide funding for that school to be built out? Do you know? Are you aware of that?
So at least in San Ramon School District, our district works, that district has a specific way that they determine whether or not a new development is going to need a new school to support the new development, or if the existing schools have enough capacities to support the new population that's being added.
Right.
So that we leave that to the school district to decide, and we partner with them as part of our development review process, and engage them early on when we get a new application in. This project will add 100 units that will generate this many school age students within these types of elementary, middle school age, high school age. And they'll look at their current enrollment numbers and future projected numbers and decide whether or not this we should be working with that developer to set aside land to accommodate for the new school age students, or the school district also has the option to have a fee that's paid as a development impact fee on a per square footage basis. And so depending on when that development were to come in and what the current enrollment is at the schools, there may be enough capacity and they would pay the fee, or potentially they may have to add new schools. We saw that, like Doherty Valley is that example of 11,000 new units. You'll definitely need, the school district said you definitely need to add a number of schools to support that new population.
So, and the reason I asked is, so when we're developing the parks, I know we have a minimum of a 2 acre and so forth. Do we use any similar type of calculation, say that the park should be larger than 2 acres, or we just say it should be minimum and we leave it up to the developer to say, we're going to allow what the size of that park is based off of how many people are moving into that area?
So the city has adopted a parkland dedication ordinance. The ordinance calculates on a per unit basis, and then depending on if you're higher density or lower density, there's a demand that's generated on a per unit basis for parkland. And so the way that the ordinance works is it's essentially development impact to address development impact. And every site has different, setting and situations. Some areas you may already be close to parkland, and even though you could set aside 2 acres, maybe the city may decide we'd rather have a fee paid instead of additional parkland added within that area. So the parkland dedication ordinance provides the guidance for the city to determine whether a fee is paid or whether acreage is donated to the city. And we'll see that with each new development project that takes place is we'll identify what the parkland obligation is. And then if there's any opportunity or interest in the city to want to have land set aside. But the number of acres is based on the number of units and then the number of people within those units. And then our parks guidance is that in order for it to be a fairly successful neighborhood park, that they would like to see it at least a 2-acre minimum. And so if you're in a denser neighborhood, maybe where you're on a 1-acre site that's building, units, you're not going to get your minimum that we're looking for. So on a project like that, you may be looking at allowing them to have the alternative feeing out.
Thank you. And then last question, can I ask you a question about the San Village specific plan?
Yes.
Package number 18 from our package tonight. There is a bullet point that says at prominent locations are contingent parcels that are under separate ownership or developable area is constrained by creek setback requirements. Strategies for facilitating lot consolidation will be needed to allow for development at key locations as needed to achieve the visions of the plan. Can you give me some examples of what those strategies are? Like, how do we get people that are on different ownerships? What are the strategies to get them to work together so that we can consolidate them, as it says in here, for the development of those key locations? It's the second bullet point under the first paragraph, the paragraph that starts, there are several challenges.
So page packet page 18 is the start of chapter 1, and it's the overview of the specific plan. There's actually a separate chapter on, I think it's called open space conservation, if I'm not mistaken, that actually is in the specific plan that talk about the different incentives that we would offer for consolidation or of ownership. We had a couple of different incentives that were built into the specific plan area that included alleyways, walkways, and they don't come to mind right now because I don't have the full plan in front of me, but it speaks more to that in that open space and conservation chapter that talk about the different creek policies that we have in place that would try to encourage contiguous parcels and strategies to address consolidation.
I guess I'm more thinking about the ones that are under separate ownership and those strategies there, but maybe we can get examples of that down the road. That would be great.
Like 8th lot is one that is owned by the city at some point. Potentially, if we build up our parkland dedication fund, there may be an opportunity for the city to target, potentially taking ownership of other parcels that are currently privately owned but are identified as parkland. Strategies like that or would be one example of how we might be able to encourage contiguous.
Thank you. I appreciate your question and your answers to my questions.
Thank you. I'm Bob. And as Bob, I'm a concerned citizen of San Ramon, and I'd like to get the current version of our general plan update. Can I go to the website and download the version that's listed as July 2023 and have the updated version of where we are right now?
July 2023.
I believe it's dated July 17th, 2023 on the website.
Oh.
There is a version that is on the website that allows you to download the current version of where we are right now.
So more than likely that's the date that we posted onto the website, July 17th. But yeah, you can, there's links on both our city's webpage, so saramone.ca.gov. You can go there to download the latest copy. You can also go to plansaramone.com to download the latest copy of the public review draft.
Or you could just go to the San Ramon City website. On the search bar, put in general plan update 2040 and you go to the same page.
Yeah.
Point is that the current version of what we are working for and have been for some time is publicly available on the website.
It is.
All right. Now, in terms of what you're asking us to do, you're not asking us to approve the general plan tonight, correct?
No, we have a series of meetings that we've set up for discussion until you feel comfortable enough that you're going to recommend adoption of that document. We won't be adopting anything.
All right. The only part of the general plan that's been adopted so far is the housing element to satisfy the overlords in Sacramento. Now, we have had sessions that have been devoted to individual sections of the general plan update. As I recall, for example, on May 16, we discussed 3 elements of the plan, including in gruesome detail, the land use element. And then on May 30th, we sat down with our friends in the city council and discussed all the elements of the general plan. And then on August 1st, we discussed a couple of elements of the general plan, including economic development. And tonight, here we are talking about the rest of the general plan elements. So it would be fair to say that, at least at the planning commission level, we've had a number of sessions that have been devoted to going over specific elements of the plan, discussing policies and implementing provisions in somewhat great detail, correct?
Yes.
And we're not done yet, are we?
No, we're not
So
done.
if you're a policy wonk and want to find out where the general plan is going, you can just dial up our San Ramon Planning Commission meetings and you'll learn probably more than you ever want to know. So I had a couple of questions about the elements tonight, and I will say that I did not think of some of these on my own. The first thing I want to ask is under 6.3 of which is in the Parks and Rec element, which if you have to go to, it is page 115 of the May 30 version. And I'm just going to read you the quote. It says, quote, "The trail system is portrayed in the general plan land use map in the land use element." Now, I don't think that map actually contains a legend for trails. There is one in the Parks and Rec element, but I don't think the general land use map includes a denotion of trails, does it?
Trying to get to which paragraph here? Is it under?
Okay, if
park
you're,
classifications
back
and
at page
standards?
115, it's the last sentence of the second paragraph under the heading 6.3 other recreation areas and facilities.
Let me just get there. And other facilities, okay. Last sentence.
Yeah. I believe the land use element shows things such as what areas are zoned for high density use, what are office and things like that. But I don't think they list the trails themselves.
I will double check where the trails are, which
Yeah,
figure has
it's,
the trails.
I'm saying this because it was brought up to my attention.
Okay,
6.3 of the Parks and Rec element does have trails,
okay,
but the land use element doesn't. So I think if you go back when you have a chance, you might want to change the last reference, the reference in that paragraph to what I think is the correct thing. Now, since we're on trails, before we go on trails, I believe, and you don't have to look this up now, just make a note for the staff. On guiding policy 6.5-I-1, I believe there's a reference to what you've been talking about with Commissioner Curtis, which is the number of acres that are supposed to be devoted to parks per 1,000 residents. And you have a figure of 6.1. I think that should be 6.5. I'm not asking you for results, I'll just check that.
yes, that's
But
correct.
going back to
6.5.
trails for a second, I know at the Open Space Committee, they've had one or more discussions on this topic. Should the area that's encompassed by trails in San Ramon be considered part of quote parks, close quote, for purposes of determining whether we meet the objective of 6.5 acres per thousand residents? Has staff discussed that? Because it's been brought up in open space at least once, if not more.
We have, and actually, we talked extensively with the Parks Commission about that particular question, about whether or not trails should, the acreage associated with the trails in the planning area should be included in our overall acreage of parkland. Currently, we do not include trails within that total acreage. If we were, and this actually came up back in 2021 when we were first doing an audit of our general plan, and had over the years had heard this feedback from open space and some other, commissions about whether or not the city should add trails within that acreage. Ultimately, after a series of discussions, both Parks Commission and internally, if you were to add the acreage associated with trails into our parkland acreage, you'll then exceed potentially 6.5 acres, and will have then already met the city's goal. And so how do you continue to encourage more parkland as part of each development to try to set aside parkland if we've already met our obligation? And so I think the hundreds of acres of trails not hundred of acres, hundreds of miles of trails that then would be added into, that parkland total would get us, have already achieved our goals. And so it would be much more difficult for us to require with each new project to set aside acreage. So we have studied that, and the Parks Commission actually took that up a couple of times, both when we were talking about policy direction and this shift from standards to guidelines, and that has come up on a number of occasions. And the direction so far is to not include trails as part of the acreage.
Okay, I think it was also discussed at open space that they would have negative effect potentially on the parkland fees that are collected. So there's a pros and cons of that whole idea. With respect to the 6.0 acres of park per thousand residents, based on what we're projecting to be a build out of 110,000 people, I guess by 2040, or build out, whichever occurs first, you're projecting 6.0 acres of parks per thousand residents. Has there been a discussion within staff about biting the bullet and just recommending changing the goal from 6.5 acres to 6.0, bearing in mind that when that 6.5 acres was initially set as a goal, the city was different than it is now, because wasn't nearly as built out as it is now. And for example, I know that 6.5 was in the general plan that we adopted in 2002, and that's before Doherty Valley was built out. So you're now talking about a city that's 95% built out, and we're scraping what we can to get even 2-acre parks. And I'm just wondering whether, and this is again discussed, I believe, at open space, whether to bite the bullet and just say our goal is 6.0. And if we do better than that, great. If not, well, c'est la vie.
We have internally discussed it, but ultimately the direction is going to have to come from Planning Commission, City Council, at least in our initial drafts that we've provided, that the feedback hasn't been to change it. Certainly, if you want to have that conversation tonight and give us that direction, we'll certainly report back on where those edits would be made and what implications that might have.
Well, what you just said, the last part of what you just said augurs against having that discussion on the cuff tonight. But I think that that's a subject that probably ought to come up at least at the next time we discuss the Park and Recs element and give us the pros and cons of doing that, because as you know, having sat through enough meetings where we talk about that ratio, that is somewhat of a fraught political issue. And if we're going to do anything, we want to make sure that we properly vetted both sides of the discussion. So I would ask at some point that we bring that up, certainly in the sense when we talk about Parks and Rec again, to at least have a vision in the staff report that addresses that issue so that we can have a meaningful discussion if we so desire.
I guess just with general comments, we already know that we're going to get to 6.0 with the acreage that we've identified as existing in future parks. There are a number of developments that we have just development areas or land uses that we've just created that we know have the potential to add additional park space. So let's say we're talking about the area south of Bollinger, there's a potential there for parkland dedication as part of that new development in that downtown mixed use south area. Let's say that project then adds acreage. We're now, instead of 6.0, maybe we're at 6.1. And we get closer and closer to that with unanticipated parkland that we may not currently foresee. If we were to change that 6.5, there may be potential acreage that we just don't know could be added right now. But we'll definitely come back. We have a joint session that we're arranging right now in October, and perhaps that may be a good place for us to have that conversation with both the planning commission.
I'll certainly give it time to come up with numbers and an extraction of where we're likely to go. On page, do you have today's packet, Andy? Could you turn to page 21? I had a question about the San Ramon Village plan. And packet page 21 is the proposed new land use diagram. Do you have that?
Yes.
Okay, here's my question. There's a number of red arrows that go from the box marked change to housing opportunity residential, which is the crosshatched area that we are proposing to put in. But there's at least 2 arrows that go to parcels that are outside the crosshatched areas. So can you explain why?
Yes. Very observant.
I'm sorry?
Very observant. We didn't just throw in 7 arrows just because there are excuse me, there are 5 parcels within the current San Ramon Village specific plan that have the residential overlay that are identified as housing opportunity sites. As part of the housing element update, we identified 2 additional housing opportunity sites in the San Ramon Village specific plan area that currently do not have a residential overlay. Those are the 2 arrows that are pointing outside of that hatched area. Those originally, as part of the housing element update, were to expand the residential overlay to add on to those 2 parcels. But because we're now removing the residential overlay altogether, all 7 of the housing opportunity sites that are on this map represent the housing opportunity sites that are identified in the housing element. So 2 of those sites were originally going to be added as 2 of those sites were going to include a hatch as part of this update process. Instead, we're taking the hatch out altogether because of the Clovis case and just identifying the 7 housing opportunity sites that were originally supposed to be residential overlay. We're now just completely changing the land use designation, just recognizing them as residential.
Okay, so are the 2 sites, parcels that are in pink without the cross hatching to which the arrow is drawn, are they going to be part of the residential or the housing opportunity residential area or not?
Yes.
Okay, so you're going to cross hatch those.
Well, they'll probably be a different color. The hatch no longer kind of works because it's not an overlay on top of the base zone. So it'll just have its own new color. So those 7 parcels will have a new color for housing opportunity residential.
Okay, you realize you're making this really difficult for colorblind people. Now, there was a comment made about changing some of the density. Let me see if I get this straight. Court of Appeal in a case called Martinez versus Clovis said that if you are using a parcel to meet your obligations for low-income housing, the residential density of that parcel has to be at least 20 dwelling units per acre.
In a metropolitan area.
Yeah.
Yes,
Does it include us?
that's correct. it
All right.
does.
So to the extent that we had housing opportunity sites that provided low income housing allocations for our arena numbers, they had to be at least 20 dwelling units per acre. So that if we had a housing opportunity site in that definition that was only 18, we had to bump up the minimum density to 20.
That's right.
Okay, so basically, I guess we don't necessarily blame the overlords in Sacramento as opposed to the Court of Appeal in Fresno, but we're required to do it by the law.
Because we have identified those parcels as meeting our RENA obligation for lower income house units.
Okay. Okay, I think mercifully, that's the last of the questions I had for tonight. So do any of the commissioners have become inspired to ask any more questions by your fellow commissioners' questions?
I had one comment, question or comment.
Either way.
Okay, so I on page 22, and I know I've discussed this before. The village center mixed use designation talks about a vibrant mix, and as I understand, you could have homes plus retail, but that retail could be one shop, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so when you use a vibrant mix, that's not sort of accurate because it is not really a vibrant mix. It's sort of like, okay, as long as you have one retail shop, that's good enough, correct?
To meet the requirements of mixed use, you have to have a mix of 2 or more uses. So by definition, you have to have a mix of at least 2 uses. Our definition of village center mixed use is a expectation of what we would like to be developed in the village center specific plan. But ultimately, because of the way that state law obligates us to have objective standards, as long as they meet the obligation of the 2 or more types of uses, vibrant is a nice description, but it's not an objective description.
Okay.
So
My concern, and I've expressed this before again, concern I have, and I understand the Dale study about not having enough vacant space for retail and how we refurbish the existing retail, is that we are building a lot of homes. And then my gut feeling is that we don't have enough retail. We're building homes and homes and homes, not focusing on sort of retails. Just my gut feeling. So just want to express that.
Through the chair, I want to go back to in the village center mixed use, it talks about the vibrant mix. That is not on a parcel by parcel basis. It's the area as a whole.
Yeah, entire
So
area.
It's the entire mix. So all the parcels redeveloped will bring in that vibrant mixed use. It's not done on a parcel by parcel basis. They are definitely interconnected to each other, but it's how the vision for that designation will ultimately develop at the end of the day. And so you may have parcels with only residential, you may have parcels with both retail and residential, or a service and residential. So it's the totality of all, not myopically on one parcel.
It might be hard to call a building that has a cleaners in the first floor and 3 stories of residential a vibrant mix, but it is mixed use. All right. Mr. Alpert.
I do have one more question that I did want to give Cindy a chance to explain. Why are we doing a general plan 2040 and not a general plan 2029 or 2031?
So the goal of the general plan document has always been to have a long-term vision for the city. And because population can change from year to year, but we can project out over a longer period of time. Over that period of time, what impacts will happen throughout that 20 years. And we want to be able to anticipate either the growth or the change that's happening within a city and then plan long-term to then be able to address those issues throughout a period that will allow us to then implement policies that actually achieve what we've set out in our vision. And so oftentimes you need that general plan document to be a broader vision of in a longer term so that we have the tools that can be implemented over that sometimes take years to implement to be able to then anticipate what things the city may need. So if we know that population is going to increase over this many people over this much time, then we can much more easily then look at what are those traffic implications and how can we start to, in year 1 and year 5, put in those tools to then address that the increase that may happen in year 7 or year 10. So it's an ability for us to plan early on for the change that we anticipate over a longer period of time.
I would also just add, we don't leave this plan static until 2040 and start working on it again. We do update plans every 5 years, and we also modify the general plan as needed when needed. So it's not safe to say that it's not correct to say that this general plan is something we're going to live with for the next 17 years. That it is a dynamic living document, which also plays into another comment that our housing element is only good for 8 years. And so, in 2029, when we start working on the next housing element, quite likely we will be going through an exercise similar to this. So thank you for that. And I did have some comments for moving forward if you're ready to take those. Okay, so my first question was, how do we address some of the comments that we've gotten? And I do feel that the shopping centers have a special status within our city, and I do think we should discuss their recommended changes, both the letter that came from the 3 shopping center owners, as well as we got another one, subsequent, I might get it wrong, but it was federal, and it was, federal, TRC, and ROIC. So I do think that we do deserve to have a discussion at a future planning commission meeting on the suggested changes for that. Similarly, we also got a request to consider the land use designation for one of our housing opportunity sites. And I feel like, and that was the Church of the Valley, that we probably should also have a discussion at a future planning commission meeting on that. I just think that those 2 we do. I think the other public comments, I think your earlier answer was exactly right, that, if something, staff is evaluating all those as far as the documents and looking at it. And I'm going to go out on a limb and assume if there's a question that you really need us to evaluate, you'll bring it before us. It's not just a guess, so, and I know you've dealt with lots and lots of public comments, and I think I'm just going to go on faith. And I know this is true that, if you need us and when there's a question, we'll discuss it. Thank you for that. The last question, and maybe you have some suggestions, and I'm not sure what the answer is. I found myself wanting to give you the same comments a second time and a third time. And I caught myself a couple of times, but I'm also feeling as if maybe I'm not. And so if there's a way that we can start to understand what the document looks, and I'm not sure if this is a fair question, but somehow I feel like if we keep looking at the rendition from May, that we might be kind of reliving the same comments, and we're not being as productive as we could be in providing you feedback in both our study and reading, and you're digesting whatever we say, because you said that twice already. So please stop it. So if there's a way that you can help us figure out a way to, trust me, I got this comment, you don't need to say it again. kind of thing. And I don't know the answer to that. I know we're not ready to publish the errata sheet yet, but if there's some version, perhaps you can think about how we can be as productive as we can.
Yeah, I mentioned that we're asking for continuation to September 5th and more than likely September 19th, October 3rd. So just a preview that you'll be seeing this project over the course of every one of your next planning commission meetings. But our goal was, at least this evening, to sort of wrap up those 10 chapters that we've already focused on for the majority of 3 planning commission meetings. And that our next goal is to move into rezoning or text amendments in the zoning ordinance. And that will be the focus of the September 5th meeting, at least at a first introduction of some of the comments that we've already received on those standards. We took those up back in March. And so this is now that have already received a lot of comments on the general plan. If there are no other major issues that you think that need to be added in, other than the ones that you'd like for us to provide you at a future date on, that we're going to more or less stop asking for comments on those 10 chapters. And then we're going to end on the Saramone Village specific plan and on the maps that we've been talking about. And our next meeting is going to focus on zoning. And then the next meeting will probably be a version of the CEQA environmental review. And then when we do get back together in a joint session, there's an opportunity there then to provide you with all of the comments we've received thus far on all of those documents, and have an errata table, but hopefully actually have the text edits in the document. So you'll see a much cleaner version, so you can read it'll be a little easier to follow all of the changes that all of the track changes that we've added in that you haven't had any issues with. Our goal is to accept those as into a clean version, because there hasn't been any request to make any edits to that. And then all the feedback that we did get over these last couple of hearings will have red lines of that in the track changes. So you can then focus on all the comments that you've given us. How do those look like now that we've interpreted that and put it into the draft? Then that way you can look at that as, am I comfortable to adopt that or recommend adoption of that to the city council? So that's kind of the way that we see this working. Hopefully it stays on track that way.
Thank you. That helps a lot.
Well, my comment regarding what you just said is this. I think that the majority of the housing of the elements of the general plan at this point are probably fairly close to a final version. The one element that I think that may require some additional work, at least to look at, is the land use element. And what I would like to see is a clean copy of that and work from that. Now, do we have a glossary? I haven't looked. Do we have a glossary in the general plan?
We don't. We typically, we currently have a glossary in the general plan 2035. And our goal was that after we sort of settled on the draft, that then we add any additional glossary terms or updated terms in the existing glossary, and also have a track change version. So, but before we get to adoption, you'll see a glossary that accompanies the 2040.
Okay, because as you know from some of our discussions in the past, sometimes there are parts of the glossary that require a little bit more work than others. So
I think just this, we can provide so the one thing I want to say is that we can provide a clean version based on comments that we've received from the public thus far, the comments that we've received from Planning Commission, but sometimes the hesitation to click accept changes is that the city council, even though they've provided us comments, they've had one meeting, and they will still also be continuing to provide us feedback. So that's so they may not necessarily be at a point where they're ready to accept track changes. We haven't had that conversation with them. So that's just something to keep in mind, is that versions could still continue to be edited.
Well, I'm just thinking about it from a standpoint of our trying to get our job, not going to worry about the city council. I think that my guess would be, if we are satisfied with the general plan elements, including the land use, that whatever comments the city council has probably will be relatively few, can be worked out without, turning the city upside down. So that would be my rest, because going back through this material several times with red lines, blue lines, getting a little bit old on the eyes. So please take that into account and see what you can do, and, do what we can. Okay, I think we're done with this particular item, and thank you for putting up with us for this long.
Thank you.
So let's move on to item number, we have no item number 11, non-public hearing action items. Let's go to item number 12, study session, commissioner liaison reports, interest items, staff reports, and whatever you want to talk about. So let's start with we don't have a study session tonight, am I correct? Okay, now the highlight of section 12 is liaison reports. So who wants to go first? Okay.
Through the chair, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. We need a motion to continue to September 5th.
We need to,
A motion to continue the public hearing to September 5th.
what if we don't give you a motion?
Then you make me renotice the whole thing.
Well, it's always nice to know the consequences. Okay, let's entertain a motion to continue the public hearing on item number 9.1 to September 5th, 2023. Okay, we have a second. All right, we got 2 votes. Let's rack it up and we'll vote. Oh, amazing. The motion passes 5-0. You have your new date.
Thank you. I do apologize for the interruption.
Okay, Commissioner liaison reports. Commissioner Curtis is whiffed. Commissioner Kuznick says no. How about Commissioner Ahmed or Commissioner Alpert?
So first of all, let me apologize to Commissioner Curtis. I received the request for the Economic Development Advisory Committee meeting, and I didn't even think to make sure you got it too. So I did attend. So I apologize that I didn't drag you with me. But they had their meeting back in last week, August 9th, and the entire meeting was dedicated to the economic element of the general plan. And their request, and I think the way they left it was they needed some time to digest it a bit more, and they would provide feedback directly to staff. And that if they concluded they wanted to have another meeting, now they meet only once a quarter, the chair would work through staff to potentially schedule a second meeting with them, just talk about that. And then yesterday, I attended the grand reopening of the Doherty Station Community Arts Center. It had been closed for months and months and months as they renovated it and turned it into what I think is going to be a great asset to the city, completely focused on the arts. So they have a number of rooms that they could offer classes, and they can rent out for anything from music to paint to visual and performing arts. And on the city's webpage, there's a schedule of all of the events they have scheduled over the next 5-6 weeks. And if you haven't looked at it, you should probably take a chance to look at take the opportunity to take a look at it, because I think the city did a really nice job with the remodel of the center. Yeah.
Thank you. I attended the Open Space Committee meeting yesterday morning. They reelected the chair, Bob Peoples, and the vice chair, Mr. Paralonzo. And they had some comments, as you know, from Mr. Peoples on the general plan. starting with open space and working his way through land use. So I hope you have a lot of pens left, Bob. Okay. All right. So I don't know if it's Mr. Barr or Ms. Chamberlain want to tell us what's coming forward, other than the continued hearing on September 5.
I'll let Lauren do that, then I have one more thing to add on.
Okay, I think Cindy already laid out the schedule in the near term. We will have a couple of use permits coming in the next few weeks, few meetings. In addition, we are gearing up for Iron Horse Village public hearings and environmental review. So date to be determined.
Okay.
And then the last thing is that, as I understand it, there are still a few tickets left for the gala on August 25th. If you guys would like to go, they're on the website. So, but they are selling quickly. So
Okay.
just to helping out getting it filled up. So
Okay, so with respect to the September 5 hearing, we're going to do the another hearing on general plan. Anything else currently on schedule for the 5th that you can tell us about?
We are targeting a use permit for a gymnasium in the
Oh.
city, We Gym.
Okay,
So, but we need to finalize it. So.
okie dokie. Okay, question for council. Since we have this notice, is we need to have public comment, open it up for public comment. Item 12.
Up to the discretion of the chair, but you don't have to.
Okay, tell you what I'm gonna do. Let's open up public comment, because I know someone that stayed here all day. Do we have anybody raising their hands who wants to talk first?
No.
And I'm guessing we don't have any written communications for item 12 of public comment?
No.
Okay, I think you have the floor, ma'am.
I cannot believe what I just heard from Ms. Poon. What a communist attorney we have. According to the Brown Act, the government needs to be transparent. She
comments that
just
she just made.
recommended
Whoa,
that
whoa, whoa, whoa,
you
whoa. Time out, time out.
don't open it up,
Time-
and now they're trying to
time
shut
out.
it down. If
Ti-
this is not
time out.
communist, then what is?
Okay, time out. You've already, wait. You made your point.
You cannot tell me what to say. The Brown Act specifically gives me the First Amendment right. I have the freedom of speech when I'm addressing my government.
Only to a certain extent.
No,
Personal attacks don't fall within.
it
the
is not
First Amendment.
personal. I'm describing the way she is advising. It is her advice that I am addressing as communist. I didn't say she is communist. I said her advice is communist.
Comments are
Did
out of.
one. I did one.
Just
Yeah,
told you
you
not
did.
to take
You
my
made
comment
use
when
of
it is
that
my
and-
right for Brown
and
Act
stretching.
comment.
Why didn't you stop right there? And if you have comments on item 12, we will hear them.
I do.
I'm waiting.
First of all, liaisons, all I have been seeing when I go to different committee members are Mr. Wallace and Mr. Alpert. What about the rest of the 3 commissioners? They don't have any assignments? I mean, when they do not attend EDAC, TAC, ITAC, and all those advisory commissions that listen to all these piecemeals that are presented by Ms. E for the general plan, you are missing a tremendous amount of information, including what those committee members say. And then you come here and you evaluate as if nothing happened. And what a wonderful way, a really finesse way, which maybe I should acquire, that Mr. Alpert just politely addressed, that no matter what kind of public comments we provide, nothing ever gets updated. We're still in May 2023. Since then, 3 months have expired. Many meetings have taken place. Nothing we say has made a dent on any revision. If this is not communist, what is? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now close public comment. And now we'll move on to item 13, which